has cerebral palsy. Her name is Dalal Lasras. She lives in a land very different from ours, stricken with poverty, war, and violence. My first interaction with cerebral palsy was through hearing her story. A story that rose above political ideologies, crossed war-torn borders, and broke the barriers between religions. A story that was brought to us by one of our guest speakers here today. I have never met Dalal, and yet I stand before you today inspired by a young girl who currently resides halfway across the globe. Inspired by her story. But more close to home, someone else who provided me with much needed inspiration was CPAYorkU, one of our speakers here today as well. Meeting Matthew has helped the team of the Cerebral Palsy Association find new motivation to do what we do. Every one of the CPA execs here today has been inspired by Matthew's enthusiasm and support, for which we are very grateful.
As Sammy said, I am working on my PhD here at York Center in my 4th year, and I'm studying wind energy. Although I would love to stand up here and talk to you about my research, which I often do when I'm in front of a crowd like this, I've decided today to talk about something different. Cerebral palsy. Born with cerebral palsy, I try not to be in the spotlight, but often I'm given no choice. In extremely simple terms, spastic cerebral palsy, the type I have, is caused by stiffness of muscles and irregular movement. Around the age of 1, my parents noticed that things weren't quite right. They noticed that when I learned to sit up, I couldn't sit up straight. And when I learned to walk, I run around on my tippy toes. Upon diagnosis at age 18 months, the doctors gave my parents a lot of unknowns. They said they didn't know if I'd ever drive a bike. They didn't know if I'd ever get my license. Was the disability purely physical, or was it partially mental as well? Imagine being told that as parents of a small town where I grew up. It breaks my heart as well that I learned recently that my mom actually at that time was blaming herself for the disability I had, which, knowing what caused it, was just an act of God. What happened was, during birth, the umbilical cord was wrapped around my throat and cut off the oxygen until the doctors could remove it. In today's world, this would be known before birth by an ultrasound. But back in 1983, in my small town of only a few thousand, ultrasounds was not a common practice. When at a small age, I did not even realize that I was different than other kids. I could fight with my sister and went to nursery school just like anyone else. But I did go to a lot of physical therapy to learn simple tasks such as climbing steps. As it turned out, I went to 93 physical therapy sessions before I entered grade primary. Luckily, my parents chose to live in Canada, or else if we lived in the States, we'd probably get lost lost half our house to pay for these sessions. I also went through a lot of speech therapy and occupational therapy to learn to pronounce certain words and do certain daily tasks, such as put on my shoes by myself or button up a button-up shirt. Yeah, so at age 5, I entered grade primary, just like any other kid. But it soon became apparent I would have trouble handwriting and begin using a primitive computer for much of my work, as much as I could do on it. There was a lot of support in trying to help me write, such as I had a desk that tilted up and held my paper in place, and the coolest pencil grips you could ever think of. But nothing really seemed to help. But let's face it, the coolest thing they gave me to try is these scissors. I remember all the kids wanted to use them, and I know you all do too. I remember one thing also that helped me when learning to handwrite is actually writing on the board. So in grade 3, when the students were practicing their handwriting in their scribble, I would be in front of the class writing my letters across the board, which was kind of fun. Academically, I went through elementary school without any problems, but fitting in socially was a different story. I had friends, but because I spoke a bit differently and moved a bit slower, I often got made fun of. And the worst was on the 1-hour bus ride to and from school. But believe it or not, the making fun of wasn't what bothered me the most. Even the friends I had didn't seem to really treat me as friends. Inside school, they were good to me, but it was like outside of school I didn't exist. They didn't ask me to do things outside of school or include me in things they did. Junior high and high school were similar academically in that I got my class notes from classmates and had teaching assistants to do my tests and exams with. I used a computer for what I could, but given the math and science courses, it was very difficult to do this on a computer. My mom also spent every evening helping me do my homework, sometimes 3 or 4 hours, but never once complained. Moving, as I went through high school, it was easy to win over my teachers and gain the respect I thought I knew I deserved. But getting the respect of my classmates was harder. The acceptance went from not being made fun of now, but more so ignorance, and again, they didn't really ask me to do things outside of school other than the odd party or go to the odd sporting event. Most of my time outside school was spent on our family farm, where I learned the ways of modern farming. This is where I really got the respect that I thought I deserved and knew I could handle. Sure, there were things I couldn't do on the farm, but given a chance, most of the things I could do. It was by age 14, I was making a serious contribution to this farm. And in Nova Scotia, you can actually get your farm tractor's license at age 14, which I did, and was hauling hay and plowing snow in no time. And I'll never forget the first time, this was well before age 14, when my great uncle came out of the house with 2 folded up $5 bills in his pocket. And that was the first time I got paid. This turned into a full-time summer job, and I was working full-time through the summer and part-time in the winter. When I wasn't holding up traffic on the roads with the farm tractor, I had what many of you may call an interesting hobby. I grew giant pumpkins and squash. This started at age 6 and continued for 20 years, following in the footsteps of my uncles and cousins. I competed provincially and at the county level, and my best was the 844-pound squash, which won first place in the province of Nova Scotia. I also sowed the seeds for up to $1 a seed, but given the amount of work I put into this, it wasn't really work. I wasn't making money. At the end of grade 12, I was chosen as the class valedictorian and gave a 10-minute speech to the grads. Upon graduation, I was accepted to 3 Nova Scotian universities, but chose to do my undergraduate in physics at Acadia, where I received a significant renewable scholarship based on my marks. It was a scary time moving into the dorms of Acadia. I suddenly had to learn how to do things myself, and not being away from home much before that, this was definitely a learning experience. But socially, things seemed to improve. People were starting to accept me for who I am, ask me to do things, and include me in their group of friends. One thing going into university I worried about was how was I going to do my assignments, tests, and exams. As it turned out, the physics department at Acadia helped find a senior undergraduate to help me out, and he was hired by the university to help me whenever I needed him. This took a little getting used to, but it became the normal, and I continued doing well in school. After first year, I decided to apply for a summer job at the Michelin plant in Bridgewater, where my dad worked. They had a great summer program where they'd hire most of the dependents if your parents worked there. The way the program worked was that you go in for a physical, and based on your physical, they'd assign you to a job that they thought you could do. I went in, thought my physical went great, and although I was a bit sad not to be working on the farm that summer, I was excited to have a summer job outside the family farm. The only problem is 2 weeks after the physical, they called me to say they had no job I could do. I was understandingly upset, more so that they didn't think I could do any of their jobs rather than the fact I didn't get the job. Not willing to give up, my dad went and talked to one of his bosses, told him what happened, and told him it just wasn't fair not to give me a chance because he knew I could do many of the jobs students were assigned to. So about a week later, I got a call and they were willing to give me a chance as a Tringle verifier. A Tringle is a wire ring that makes the rim of your tire. And these Tringles have to be perfect before entering the tire, or else the entire tire will become defective. The only catch is I had to meet a quota of 1,200 verified Tringles per shift, or else they'd have to let me go. And this was in 2 weeks. So I went in my first day, and it came and gone, and I got 600 Tringles. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I know if I can get close, they'll hire me, but I gotta increase my production by 100%. So my dad sat me down that night and was like, okay, we know you can do this, you know you can do this, but things to help you, just go in a few minutes early, shorten your breaks a couple minutes, and you'll be there in no time. So I worked away, working harder and harder, and 2 days before the trial period was over, sure enough I reached 1,200, and they hired me. I continued working all summer, getting more and more, and by the end of the summer, I was getting more than anyone posted at that post. Christmas came and they needed one student to cover vacations for Christmas. And out of 4 students that worked there the past summer, they chose me to come work. And I think this is when I really felt that they knew they made a mistake by not giving me a chance. I mean, I'm the first to admit if I can't do something, I shouldn't be doing it. But I knew I could do this, and I proved that I could. Scribing continued in a similar way in my second year, but I found a program that I could do a lot of my math and physics on the computer. This gave me a lot of independence, and I could do things on my own time, relying less and less on a scribe. A big change happened after my 3rd year when I stayed at Acadia to do summer research on my honors thesis. This is when a small amount of students stay at the university to do research and really form a tight-knit group of friends. This is really when I learned what good friends were, and I became really close to all of them. I was the only student of my honors supervisor that summer, and learned really what scientific research was all about, and he inspired me to apply for my master's. Working one-on-one, I really created a good work ethic as I worked on computer modeling of the Antarctic circumpolar current. The social aspect of my life continued through my 4th year, and a good friend nominated me for class valedictorian. The students voted me as their valedictorian after giving a trial speech. It wasn't until 3 years after this speech when I learned that I inspired a couple from Huntsville to set up the Gloria Fulton Memorial Award at Acadia for students that are physically challenged with preference given to Nova Scotia citizens. The couple was there to see their grandson, but after seeing my speech, decided to set up this award in memory of their cousin Gloria, who was born and raised in Nova Scotia and lived her 80 years with cerebral palsy, most of it in a wheelchair. But she continued to inspire people and created awareness through her entire life. The couple, along with family members and one of Gloria's friends, financed $25,000 to the Acadia Endowment to give enough in interest to provide one award per year of about $1,000. After being accepted at a few different universities across Canada for my master's, I chose Dalhousie University with a research project in wind forecasting. My social and academic success continued, and soon I had more friends than I ever had. These friends supported me and included me in everything I did. But as part of my research, I spent about half of my time at Environment Canada's National Lab in Dartmouth, working with some of their research and operational meteorologists. And I gained a lot of speaking experience as well. I defended my master's in August 2008, and although I pondered a few options, I decided to continue graduate school and do my PhD. I really enjoyed my master's, but was looking to apply my wind knowledge to a specific application. I got in touch with a professor here at York, and he spoke of an opportunity to do my PhD in conjunction with a project with Toronto Hydro on an offshore wind energy project. I was immediately interested and decided to move to Toronto in October 2008 to do my PhD. For this type of degree, it's mostly research-based, but you are required to do 3 to 4 classes. Using that program I spoke of earlier, I can now do most of my courses all on the computer. But there was one course I wanted to take, which is synoptic meteorology, which is a course meant to teach you weather forecasting. This course requires a lot of map work for the labs, and I knew I would need a scribe. So, trying to be proactive, I set up a meeting with Disability Service at the beginning of August to discuss this scribe for a course beginning in September. I was surprised to learn that a scribe wasn't funded through the center unless you qualify for a student loan. being a graduate student and receiving TA shifts as well as research assistantship, I knew I wouldn't qualify for a student loan. To make it even worse, they told me if I was deaf and needed an interpreter, that's funded with whether or not you qualify for a student loan. I expressed my concern with this, saying it's no different, but they said it was beyond their control as it was government funding and the government sets the rules. So they said, okay, there are two other options. One, you get a volunteer to help you, or two, you pay for it out of your own pocket. Both of which I kind of thought were crazy. First of all, getting a volunteer, which turned out to be 50 hours over a term, is a lot to ask of someone. And on top of that, if they're volunteering, it's a lot harder for me to say, no, that's wrong, do it over. As well, I couldn't afford to do this. So I, not knowing what to do and dissatisfied, I left and went to talk to my PhD supervisor. And luckily, he was able to come up with the funding to fund my scribe, and grad studies kicked in a bit at the end. So it turned out that it worked out well, but it still puzzles me why their funding structure is the way it is. At York, part of my duties are, as a grad student, is to TA. And although I do mostly marking, I do on occasion enter the class and help invigilate tests and exams. Although I enjoy this, it does pose challenges and stress for me. Earlier this year, another TA and myself were invigilating a midterm of about 130 students, and as it turns out, it was in this room. And at the beginning of the class, there's always a panic to hand out the test to make sure everyone can start on time and get the same amount of time. Well, you guessed it, I dropped the entire pile of midterms. The students didn't make a big deal of it. They helped me pick them up and I continued. But I really felt bad about this and embarrassed. Another time, just last week actually, I was invigilating a clicker test. So what a clicker test is, every student in the class has a clicker like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and just click in the right answer that's up on the screen. This was a bigger class of 250 students, and the students continually talked and was disrespectful and tried to cheat. These three students asked to be quiet, or else I would give them 0, which was more a threat, but nonetheless. When I asked them, one of the students broke out laughing as if, who are you to tell me to be quiet, and I don't have to listen to you. I wanted to say something, but I just walked away and let them go. Not talking, of course. In terms of my research, I am able to do all my research on my computer and spend some time at Toronto Hydro as part of my and Circ Industrial Postgraduate Scholarship. That scholarship I currently hold. I also, as the Canadian Meteorological and Oceanographic Society representative at York, student representative, and I organize a forecasting challenge at York for mainly undergrads. Socially being accepted is one thing, but there are times that I feel like I am unfairly judged. One of these situations, I am often treated unfairly, is anywhere where there is perception that people might potentially be drunk. At my first high school dance, the cop stopped me at the front door and said, "Have you been drinking?" Obviously I wasn't. Another thing at bars, now sometimes they accuse me of being too drunk, which often I'm not. But the most frustrating thing is sometimes cabs will pull up and just think I'm drinking and drive right by. And this is really frustrating because at bars I can explain to them what's going on, but cabs can just drive away without knowing what's going on. So, as I near the end of my talk, I'd like to end on a bit of a happier note. If you remember back at the first of the talk, I mentioned that the doctors told my parents that I may never be able to have my license or drive a bike. Well, I'm pleased to tell you I do both. I learned to drive a bike at age 5, and although the training wheels stayed on a bit longer, I'm pleased to say they're long gone. And I drive my bike all the time in downtown Toronto. This summer I clocked 2,800 kilometers, and for those keeping track, that's from Halifax to Thunder Bay. I also at age 16 turned my tractor's license into a real license, and I can drive a car just like anyone else. These are both two things that I'm really proud of. I'd like to end with a lesson that a friend of mine at Acadia taught me. And although it pertains to my situation, it can be applied to anyone. My friend told me when he met me, he found out I had cerebral palsy. But he didn't really know what that was, what that meant, not encountering this before. He went away and said he read about it for a while on Wikipedia, but realized that what he was reading did not really describe what he was seeing in me. So then he came back and talked to me and said, "You know what, Matt, I learned more about cerebral palsy by talking to you than I could ever read about." I think this means a lot in that you can read all you want or look at pictures, but if you're not going to get to know someone, you won't know what they're really like. So if you actually take the time to get to know people, you'll realize they're just like anyone else you know. Most people with challenges want more than anything just to be treated equally and like everyone else. I'd like to thank CPA for having me as a speaker tonight. I really enjoyed it. I'd also like to thank all of you for coming, especially some of my friends who left work early just to be here to hear me speak. Thank you.